All right, so good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to this, our Career in Aging Week. And so this is one of our signature events. We're going to be having a men's panel this afternoon, and I'm absolutely delighted to be moderating today's session. I'm Julianne McCoy Davis, and I have a great group of men with me this afternoon in the house. And I'm just excited about what is about to take place. So just to get us going, I'm going to invite the director of the Mona Aging and Wellness Center, Dr. Dula Del Whittingdale at this time to just comment.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope everybody is doing really very well today. We're so happy. We're so excited to be able to host this session. As Dr. McCoy Davis mentioned, we are celebrating Careers in Aging Week this week. And so this is one of our events that we will use to highlight to our stakeholders all the amazing and exciting and rewarding career options that there are in the field of aging. I particularly like today's session because aging globally is a female-dominated profession, and to be able to identify 4 distinguished gentlemen who work in Jamaica, have worked in the wider Caribbean region, and are able to be a part of this event today is really something that's amazing, and we're very proud of, and we're very happy that they have taken the time. So let me welcome you, our audience. We encourage those of you who are online right now to share the link, invite your friends, come and let them hear about what these few good men, as I call them, have been bringing to this field, to this profession, how they have been contributing to make this world a better place for our older adults. Very happy to be able to welcome you, and I do hope you enjoy the session. I hope it is informative, and I really do hope that you would have found it worthwhile to have spent the time with us. Do enjoy.
All right, great. Thank you so very much, Dr. Whittingdale, for those welcome remarks. And so at this time, I want to lead us right into our discussion with these gentlemen. As Dr. Whittingdale said, few good men, and definitely these men are working in the field of aging. And so as we celebrate Career in Aging Week, we really want to be highlighting them and highlighting the work that they have been doing throughout the Caribbean as well as Jamaica. And so I am particularly pleased to introduce our panel. And so the first person I'd like to introduce to us is Mr. Jeffrey James. He is Vincentian by birth and has been working in the area of development for quite a number of years, maybe decades. And he has worked primarily in the non-governmental organization sector. He served as country director for Save the Children Canada for 6+ years. And he subsequently joined HelpAge International, based in the Caribbean, as the regional representative, a position that he has held for over 18 years. His work with HelpAge International has taken him extensively throughout the Caribbean region, and he has been working based across different Caribbean countries. And so I'm sure that he has a wealth of experience throughout the region that he will be able to share with us. I also want to proudly say that he was my first mentor and my first employer in the area of aging. And so I'm very happy to have him with us this afternoon. Welcome, Mr. James.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Laurent Amil. I'm gonna try to use the French pronunciation, and you can correct me when you join later. So he started a nursing care center in 2015. And so because he wanted to better understand his area of work, his passion, and what it is he was doing, he came to us here at Mona Aging and Wellness Center and participating in a postgraduate diploma in gerontology, which I am sure meant a lot to him at the time. I remember sitting in numerous classes with him as his lecturer, as well as a colleague, and those were very interesting sessions. His primary reason for undertaking this course, as I mentioned before, was definitely to supplement his area of work and his business. So as soon as he learned something in class, then he would quickly go out and try to get it implemented in his business. And I must say he has a very successful nursing care business. And definitely, you know, sometimes you see some nursing home and you'd say, no, that's not where I want to go. Well, I've been to his place, and it's definitely somewhere that I would want to go if I get old and I would need a place. So I'm delighted to have him sharing with us this afternoon. So welcome, Mr. Hamill. Next, we have Marlon Johnson. And Marlon Johnson is a parish organizer working with the National Council for Senior Citizens. He's responsible for the parish of St. Andrew, and he has been working in that position since 2018. He was formerly a social worker based with the Program of Advancement through Health and Education, that's PATH, and he enjoys serving vulnerable persons. His interests include the fact that he is an avid cricket player as well as a football fan, and he also wants us to know that he is a St. George's College past student. I think he must have a reason for telling that to us. So, you know, I mean, in light of champs that's going on right now, I'm sure he wants us to bear that in mind. All right. And our fourth panelist this afternoon is Mr. Nicoy Francis. Now, Nicoy Francis pursued a degree in social work at Northern Caribbean University and subsequently began working with older adults in Western Jamaica. He's originally from St. Elizabeth, and he started working with HelpAge International in 2013. So while working with HelpAge, he had responsibility for a diabetic retinopathy project in which he was responsible for leading the charge in preventing, detecting, and treating diabetes, as well as diabetic retinopathy among older persons in St. Elizabeth, in collaboration with the Southern Regional Health Authority. He currently serves as the Portland Parish Organizer for the National Council for Senior Citizens, a position he has held since May 22. Imagine COVID keeping on him get up in the middle of COVID and decide that he wants to help the vulnerable. He clearly has a passion for this. So welcome, Mr. Francis, and welcome to you all, our panelists this afternoon. And of course, I know Dr. Whittingdale did welcome our viewing audience. So we're just gonna go right into our discussion this afternoon. So some persons might be wondering, why should we be talking about men and men in the field of aging? Well, as Dr. Tyndale mentioned, the profession of aging is primarily a female-dominated profession. And so to have men working in the area, that is something that is particularly good, and I am sure must be very rewarding for them. In addition to that, when we think about demographics in terms of our population and what is happening in terms of male and females within our population, the Jamaican population, for example, the 2021 Economic and Social Survey of Jamaica indicates that approximately 13.9% of Jamaica's population is over the age of 60. And by the way, age 60 is the age at which we recognize someone as being an older adult. And so approximately 52.3% of our Jamaican population who are over the age of 60 are women. And so 47% are men. And so really what we have recognized, having worked in different sectors in aging, is to note that within the profession of aging, we hardly have males. In my office, of how many women, we only have one male member of our team who is not necessarily working directly in the field. He works indirectly. And so even in terms of our academic programs, we have seen since our programs have started that we may have one male every 2 years or something like that. And so we really want to see an increase in the number of men who are taking up this kind of profession. So with that said, painting the context of why we're here this afternoon, I invite our panelists now. We want to get a little bit of background about their current involvement in the field of aging. And so I'm going to start off with one of the youngest to the profession. I'm going to start off with Mr. Francis. So at this time, what it is that you're currently involved in doing in the field of aging, and yeah, just take it from there.
Okay, good evening again, Dr. Davis. So as the parish organizer for Portland, we work with older persons, connect them with support services. We also, in promoting active aging, we do a lot of community activities with groups, clubs. We have Bible quiz, which is coming up. We mobilize the groups, we train them. We have sports day coming up, mobilize. Just yesterday, we had a cancer awareness and wellness workshop. So we bring groups from across the parish and we increase their awareness on different matters that are related to older persons.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for sharing that. And Mr. Hamill, can you just share with us what it is that you're currently doing now in terms of your area of work?
Okay, thank you, Julian. What we are involved with then and now is really caring for persons who would have reached a stage in their life cycle that they are not able to care for themselves. And that in itself is quite a task. Mm-hmm. It is all good and well when we are young and energetic that we sometimes take life for granted, not remembering or forgetting that if we are fortunate to live to that age, we get to a stage where we become dependent. And it is this dependency that would have caused me to be involved with this nursing care facility. Okay. The persons who are coming in, just like what you're having here, where you don't have a lot of men getting involved in the profession. We are seeing the converse in the nursing home, where you have more men coming into the nursing home than females. And it begs the question, yes, if the males had the knowledge or were mindful of what eventually will come, if they live long enough, would the situation, would the dynamics change?
Would it have been different?
So, yes, so I'm excited, as we go through this discussion, to see what we can advance to get more men involved, because I think it is absolutely necessary.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Mr. James, can you just share with us what it is that you're currently doing as far as aging is concerned?
Well, I have not been directly involved in the field of aging since 2016, when Help Age International withdrew from the region. But what I've been doing is I continue with my networks because I worked across the region. I support those organizations within the region that are involved in aging matters. I go on programs and I provide information and knowledge about issues affecting older people. And I've been doing a consultancy work in the field of disaster management and doing research and ensuring that older people's issues are highlighted in whatever programs that are available to support older people. So basically that's what I'm doing at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. James. And Marlon, what it is that you're doing now, tell us about your work.
Okay, as you know, as a social worker for the National Council, we're currently engaging in programs and activities to support and promote the inclusion, the well-being, and the rights of older persons. We have, as the government flagship agency for aging, we give oversight and the implementation of our national policy for senior citizens. So basically what we do in a nutshell. Mr. Francis has already gave you a mouthful of what we do. Can we do the same thing?
All right, great.
Yeah.
So gentlemen, big question now. Why did you enter the field of aging? What it is that pulled you into aging? Anybody want to start? Just jump in.
Well, I would say that the career chose me as early in my childhood years as I've been lucky to be around my great grandmother, grandfather, and grandmother. And by virtue of that, when you go on weekends, you'll be doing errands, fixing shoes for church, helping them with their medication. So by virtue of that, the career was ordained that the career would have chosen me. Moving on into high school, we had to do outreach as a part of our requirement for graduation at St. George's College. Most of the time, our placement sites would be the Golden Age Home, the Mustard Seeds community. And further on now, when I started my social work career in the public assent division, I was open up to different age groups, being teenagers, adults, and child, and the elderly. So by virtue, it's like each step had prepared me for something greater. Sometimes you do things early in your life and you don't see how it really leads you onto that journey. So the career basically chose me. And then I came here at the National Council, started out my work in St. Thomas, where I was well received, and big up to the persons in St. Thomas. So basically the career has chosen me, and I have been well received, and I greatly appreciate it.
Okay, great. Thanks. Mr. James, what prompted you to enter the field of aging?
Well, first, let me say I have a background in social work, and I did graduate studies in the social sciences. And so naturally, I was involved in work with people. I had worked for 20 years with children and more broadly in community development. And in community development, I interface not only with children, but with parents, grandparents, because a lot of grandparents, older people, had responsibility for children. So I had a background of 20 years of working with people. But in terms of working with HelpAge itself, it was kind of fortuitous. After Save the Children Canada, the international NGO I was working with, closed their program in Jamaica. I was in between jobs, and I had a job offer with another international NGO. But it would have involved relocating, and I was having some problems with that. So there was a friend of mine from graduate school who was working with another international NGO in the UK, and she was visiting one of our projects in Jamaica, and she said to me, I was given this advertisement, and they asked me if I knew of anybody who was interested in this position as the regional representative for HelpAge. I should pass it on to them. And so she gave it to me. And then I looked at it and I said, okay, this is something I'd be interested in. Mm-hmm. So I immediately wrote to, it was Oxfam at the time, and I told them I was no longer interested in the job because I had the offer. And even without getting the job at HelpAge, I decided I wasn't going to take that. Mm-hmm. And so I applied and got the job, and that's how I ended up with HelpAge International and work with older people. The other thing that I liked, it was a regional job. And I was working with organizations across the region, which were members of HelpAge International. And I was very much interested in supporting and building organizations. Mm-hmm. And this provided the opportunity for me to do that. Added to that, I liked the role that I was called upon to play in terms of some of the activities in which I was going to be involved. Things that I was very much interested in: research, advocacy, policy influence. Because one of the things, having been trained in social work, I found was that, and that's why I like community development, because what I felt was that social work allowed you to give people the skills to cope with the issues they were facing. But it was not allowing you sufficiently, unless you did community development, mm-hmm. did not allow you to assist them to challenge the system,
right,
which was creating the problems that they face. Because we're saying every problem that the individual faces is a psychosocial problem, meaning that there's something in the environment which is creating discomfort. and difficulty for the individual. And that is why the individual ended up with some of these issues that they were facing. And I was saying to myself, you know, because my perspective was more developmental, if the system is what is creating the problem, then you need to change that system. So one of the things that working with HelpAge enabled me to do was to assist people in doing advocacy, training people, older people, to engage with authority figures, to engage with policymakers, and to confront them about their issue. And that's one of the most important things I enjoyed about working with older people, in that I was able to give them a voice. Older people generally are socially isolated, they're socially excluded, and bringing them into the frame was one of the things I enjoyed most in that type of work.
Okay. All right, great. So, Nikoi, what it is that prompted you to come into the field of aging? Just a minute, you.
Mic is mute.
Right.
Okay, so I have always had that passion for serving, and that prompted me to pursue my degree in social work. However, when I was studying, I was undecided as to what area of social work I wanted to enter. In my final year, when I was doing my practicum experience, well, on the practicum form, you'd sign up where you'd want to be placed for your practicum experience. I chose Ministry of Labor and Social Security. That was the Santa Cruz office. So I was placed there. But the first day, I was anticipating to be placed somewhere like in PATH, because at the time, PATH was, you know, they were trying to, PATH was fairly new at the time, and taking on some persons, and I know they took on a lot of social workers. But I was placed on my first day with a social worker to a department called the National Council for Senior Citizens. So it was me and my supervisor, practicum supervisor at the time, and going to club meetings, observing her in office, connecting with the seniors. Myself, I grew with my grandparents, so, and I've always had that passion, like, for knowledge and seeing things from a historical perspective. And the seniors, you know, they represent like a reservoir of knowledge. They have all that knowledge that I could just learn from, and while serving.
All right. And so that prompted you. All right, great. So, Mr. Hamill, how did you enter this field?
Well, you know, the truth to be told, it's probably by default. I am a businessman at heart, and I would have seen an opportunity in this field. But having gotten into it, I can tell you now that my entire focus has shifted from business really to what this aging process involves. It has modified the way how I see persons live their lives. It has shown me that really and truly, if you don't plan for those later years in terms of your physical well-being, your mental well-being, your independence, if you don't plan now, then you can be caught off guard. And so I have grown to really love it. When you interact with these elderly persons, you come to realize that they have a wealth of knowledge. They have a wealth of knowledge. They can guide you, and certainly they are at the point of their lives where they need assistance, they need care. So I tell you, that would have mellowed me. And so I really and truly enjoy being in this field. You know, it is often said sometimes you probably try to get a particular type of vehicle. And while you're processing it, you start seeing a lot of those vehicles on the road.
Yes.
It is similar to this situation.
Yes.
Prior to getting involved, healthcare, aging healthily, it exists. But until you become involved in it, then you realize how wide, how great a span it is. So that is what has really pulled me in and is keeping me going. Yeah, it's really heartbreaking to see persons who would have lived well-to-do lives, would have lived a life up to the point where they probably are coming to the nursing facility of independence, of being able to take care of things, and something happened on the way, and they are now in a care facility.
Okay.
Yes, that part can be saddening. So I would want to say for all of us that we must be guarded, as the good book would say, number your days and apply your heart unto wisdom. If you don't try and age healthily, you can pay the price down the
Later
road,
on. Okay.
which could cause you to come into a nursing care facility, which is not always the ideal place to be, But that's really what it is for me.
So gentlemen, having established how it is that you came into the field of aging, I really want our viewers to understand, are there particular skill sets that are important for persons to have when they enter the field of aging? So this is not just about being a man or being male, but just anybody who is working in the field of aging. What kind of personality or skill sets are ideal for working in the area of aging?
I think, first of all, you have to like to work with people. That's a given. And generally, specifically as it relates to older people, you have to be patient. You have to have a lot of patience. You have to understand the needs of older people, and you have to understand what happens through their life course, what are the characteristics of people as they age, and how you treat with those issues. You have to have an understanding of that. You have to be able to listen. You have to be a good listener, because older people like to feel part of, they like to be included. Sometimes you have to sit and listen to them. I remember doing quite a bit of research, getting people going out there and collecting information. And what the interviewers would say to me, the older people would comment that it's the first in a long time I've had somebody come and sit down and talk to me. So they love being listened to. So you have to be patient. You have to be able to converse with them, understand their needs and interests, if you really want to progress in this area of work.
All right, great. Nikoi, what would you say are the skill sets that are ideal for persons to have?
Well, you have to be empathetic. You have to have an open mind working with seniors, compassionate, and with that open mind and empathy, you trying to understand what the seniors are going through, you putting yourself in that position. You imagine yourself 40 years down the line and, with that person in front of you, and how best you can address that senior and help that senior going forward. And as I said, with an open mind, knowing that persons are from different backgrounds and have different needs, and, that will put you in a better position in helping them to address whatever concerns they might have.
So, Mr. Hamill, for you in the nursing care sector, are there other skills that are, apart from the ones that you go and learn in school, the clinical skills, what other kind of skill sets are good for persons who want to, to work in nursing care?
Right. the ability to communicate. And this would be more, you know, verbal communication. Yes, for those who are not necessarily hearing impaired. Being able to communicate well, I have found very critical. It was already raised, empathizing, being able to project yourselves into their situation. Planning, I have found, is also a critical tool. So in the nursing care setting, you want to keep persons engaged. And therefore, it means you will have to plan ahead. You know, what programs can you put in place to keep them engaged? How can you best get everybody involved? Of course, persons will have different abilities. So therefore, how can you, you know, broaden the spectrum of involvement? So planning, communication, empathizing, / projecting yourself into their own situation to get a feel as to, you know, where they would have been and what they're currently going through. I think are some critical skills. Of course, you are, for the most part, you will not be the only person dealing with caring for these elderly persons. So it brings into play the other aspect of people management. You'll have a staff, team building, you know, so that's another element of it. And just dealing with the wider public, those stakeholders who will have an interest in the care of these elderly persons. So it's really multifaceted, if you ask me.
Sure. Thanks for that. So, Mr. Johnson, over to you. The question at this stage is, as a man, you know, you're working in the field of aging, an area that has been predominantly female. How do you see a difference in terms of the way that you execute your function in comparison to females? I know that, for example, for the council, you know, in your position as parish organizer, yourself and Nicole would be the two males on the team of other women. So how do you feel as a man being able to execute your function? Do you recognize differences?
Yes, I do. Instead of we compete, we complement and work as a team. As you know, we have certain guidelines and procedures that we must follow, execute as social work at the council. So regardless of our gender, we have to do those. What I do though, I pull on their strengths because women are much more emotional, and sometimes you need that additional eye and that additional lens when they go out in the field. So this is my approach. I don't let my ego get the better of me. But that's how I would answer that question.
All right. Okay. Thank you. And I just have Nicole follow up same time during the same post.
Yes. It's more of us complementing, you know, our colleagues, female colleagues. You know, we have different activities, you know, you might, and we can make work easier for each other in different areas based on the area of work that we're executing.
All right. That's fine. Now, Mr. James, I mean, in terms of your position as leader going throughout the Caribbean region, did you notice any difference in terms of, for example, how persons would engage you as opposed to other females working in similar roles or positions throughout the region and locally as well? Did you feel differently when you went to the communities dealing with these old adults?
To be honest, I never thought of it. I know most of the times I might be the only male in the room. Even looking back at my time with HelpAge, I would say about over the years, 75% of the staff had been female. But I never saw any difference. I never in the way people looked at you, whether you're male or female. I never picked up. I was aware of it, but I never sensed any difference. What I know is that if in this type of work, and it's happening in teaching now, where you find the teachers are predominantly female, people tend to say these are the women are attracted to those areas where you require soft skills, and then the men are more into those areas like engineering and construction and those kinds of things. But I really have not seen, sense any difference in the way people looked at you.
Mhm.
And I know also at the community level, it was really a lot of women who came forward, and not so much the men. I know over the years, the National Council for Senior Citizens had a problem attracting men into the groups at the community level, and they would try things like dominoes and so on to encourage them. But men find other ways of using up their time, and in terms of social interaction, women apart from the church, they're not out there socializing, attending some of these sporting events, and so on. So there are reasons for it, and it's the nature of the societies in which we live.
All right, fine. So, Mr. Hamill, with especially your organization, Caregiving, and as a male, how do you feel? I mean, do you get any reaction from your clients when they meet you for the first time? Oh, what kind of reactions do you get from your clients, and does it make a difference in terms of how you compare yourself in terms of your ability to execute your function?
I think primarily because, as mentioned by some of the other panelists, you would have been conditioned to see females involved in this kind of caregiving activity. So you might find a gap, but in a wider spectrum, I think men are slowly getting involved. Even for the practical nurses who administer the care for these elderly persons, it would have been 9 out of 10 of them would be females. But now you're finding males who are getting involved in the educational program. And so you do get application from males who wish to come in and administer care. It is a slow process, but I think over time with education, you will have more and more males getting into the field. Even the hospitals, you really don't see a lot of male nurses, primarily female, but gradually you see the infusion of male nurses coming in. But it is not overwhelmingly shocking, certainly from my vantage point, when persons come in and they see the organization run by a male. It's not a remarkable difference, but there certainly is a lot of room for males to enter. And I mean, we have our own value system, skill sets to give. The females seem to be, naturally are more nurturing. But as males, we do have our values that we can add to it. And so in collaboration with the females, make it a perfect operation, or almost perfect.
Well, something that I'm gathering from the responses so far is the whole element of one. Well, Mr. James responded that he hadn't recognized any difference in terms of his ability to function throughout his career in a female-dominated area per se. Mr. Hamill's similar response, whereas Marlon and Nicole are mentioning the whole element of being able to use your position as a male to complement the women who are working in the field. So I think that really, those points are very pertinent to really rationalize to other men, for example, who may be listening us now or who will listen to us in the future, to help them to understand, for example, that we may have been conditioned to see a female-dominated profession in terms of the aging sector, but it doesn't necessarily mean that as a man, you're not able to function and execute well. And I think that that is very important. But it really brings us back to a point that was raised much earlier and that we come back to now, which is the fact that one, we're not seeing a lot of men in the profession. And two, as Mr. James mentioned, you're not seeing a lot of men as beneficiaries at the community level. For example, to be partakers of the services that are offered. So Mr. James, Marlon, and Nikoi would be working at the community level in terms of their kind of work, and they're engaging with different men. Nikoi mentioned earlier different activities in terms of Bible quiz, spelling bee, and also, for example, Senior Sports Day that is coming up. And I am certain, based on historical information, that the level of participation of men would be low in that. But the flip side of what we're seeing, because what Mr. Hamill mentioned, is that in the nursing care sector, you do see more men, for example, requiring nursing care than women. And so what I really want us to probe on right now is how, for example, what are some of the strategies that we could suggest, that you could suggest, to encourage more men to come into the area, one, as professionals, and two, as older adults, to be engaged in accessing the different services. What can we do to encourage men to come into the profession?
Before I go into that, Julian, let me make another point. In my experience, because a lot of donor agencies, when you do projects, they want you to do a gender analysis. How does this, whatever issue it is, affect women as against men? And what I have found in trying to do this gender analysis, there's hardly any differences that are pointed out by these people. They would say, we experience it the same way, men and women. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying that to make the point that basically it is how you relate to people and how people see you. I don't think, my experience is that these people never saw me through any gender lens. Yeah. They just saw me as a human being and how I related to them. Because I never picked up. In some instances, if it were a young person, they would say, but what do you know about older people? Mm-hmm. I mean, and I've had that feedback because when I had staff, younger staff, interfacing with some of these people, they looked at them in a particular way. Mm-hmm. It's more about age rather than about sex or gender. Mm-hmm. That was my experience.
All right.
In terms of the other question that you asked, the fact is, women are living longer than men. Mm-hmm. And that's at the community level, that's why part of the reason why you would find more women engaged in programs and activities. Secondly, as Nikoi pointed out, women are generally more the nurturers, the caregivers, and so on. And that's where a lot of support is needed. And women would tend to care for their older parents, their older mothers, and so on. Men, because of the structure and the nature of the Caribbean family, a lot of women have not grown up with their fathers. So when it comes to that stage of their life where they require the care, the family caregiver is not available. And that's why a lot of them end up in nursing homes and so on. As I pointed out earlier, men's social life, social activities are different to women. So when you organize a program at the community level for older people, men are less inclined to be part of it. The other thing is, at the time that some of these programs are organized, a lot of the men are, especially in rural areas, are in the field. they're doing physical agricultural work and so on, because a lot of the rural folks are involved in farming. And so that's part of the reason why we have this sort of dichotomy, if you want to call it that. I think the whole idea is to meet men where they are. Look at the things they're interested in and meet them at that point, rather than simply organizing programs and inviting them to the programs. You have to go to where they are and meet them where they are and organize around those type of activities that they're interested in.
Okay, good, thanks. Mr. James, Nicole, go ahead.
So we're talking about as how we can attract more males, one as a worker and beneficiaries at the community level. So I know that especially at the high school level, I mean, you ask most persons or males what they would want to become. You know, they're going to tell you a soldier, a police, a doctor, a lawyer. So the awareness at that level, you know, we need to expose persons at that level to career opportunities in aging. Not many might know that, okay, you have parish organizers who work in different work with seniors, and there are other posts that are coming on, like community liaisons officers with the National Council for Senior Citizens, you know, gerontologists, you know, so we need to expose persons at a younger age to the careers in the field, and to attract more social workers or more workers to the field. Also, Mr. Hamil also said he's seen more males coming in as practical nurses in the nursing home, and you know, we could expose younger persons, males, you know, at that level to, you know, those careers. At the community level, like beneficiaries, I know we might have colleagues, they might be fearful when entering some communities. That, for example, might be because of violence or probably the natural makeup of the place, the area, the site to visit. Whereas you might have a male who might be less fearful, who, you know, can just enter that community. And it's not across the board, but, you know, it's how we're cultured. You know, you would have more females who are fearful to enter some communities. And when you go to those communities, you have many persons who aren't reached, who aren't benefiting from the services that we offer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Marlon?
Okay, well, as for getting increase in terms of workers, I think from the university standpoint, I don't know if maybe lowering the matriculation to get into social science for social work could work. I know in some cases it has, you know, generally though, there are far more males going for higher level training and education. That could be one point, or you're offering scholarship that are specialized just to males. Mr. James made a good point about meeting men where they are. So some of our programs, we want to meet them where they are. So they're in the sports clubs, they are in the bars, they are in the lounge, you know, the sport. Maybe that's where we'll have to go and basically give some of our programs that we offer at the council. I was speaking to Nicole a few months ago too. It would be good for us to have something similar to what the SDC has with their T20 competition, and that has done a lot for community development. That brings out males, men, brings out everybody. So maybe we can meet them where they are with our services. I know at the council, as it relates to workers or directors, is open to having more men, and that is very good. And our programs are geared towards our domino and our sports days. So I know we can meet them where they are, because most men, those are the places that where they are, and we can get them from there. I think that could be a nice way to start off.
Okay, good.
I want to say something else.
Sure.
Sure.
I didn't say anything about careers in aging. In the Caribbean, population aging is a new phenomenon. So there are not many opportunities in that field. Compared with, say, Europe, you find a lot of people, a lot of men in particular, in the population aging field. So the opportunities are not there, and that's part of the reason, because we don't do the research. We don't frame and fashion the policies which impact on older people. So there are not programs, there are very few programs in the region which are directly targeting older people. And so the opportunities for work in these areas are not prevalent. So if you're a social worker, if you are a social scientist, for example, you're going to find work with children, you're going to find work with youth, you're going to find work with women, but there are not a lot of programs for work with older people, and that's part of the reason.
Okay, good. Thanks for that, Mr. James. Mr. Hamill, you want to jump in right now?
Right. So that last point that Jeff made is really a profound point. The absence of opportunities for, getting older persons involved. The population aging, you really don't find the knowledge widespread. So, people are really acting out of ignorance. If we seek to ramp up the educational programs, starting from, as Nicole had said, the earlier school years, and sensitize these kids coming up, I think over time you will have a built-in awareness where people can now focus, not only on the traditional areas that they can be employed in, but will start focusing on this area that we are concerned about, getting more males involved in the population aging part of it. In my own experience in the care facility, what you find happening is even when the males are in the facility, the visitation for them are usually from the females. You can, count on one hand how many males will be visiting. And again, that speaks to, in my view, probably the nurturing aspect for the females. But given the fact that you have more males coming into the facility, and it's not unique to my facility alone, then it begs the question that there's room for further education and scope for getting people involved in this aspect of the aging process. So the pivotal point would be education, yes, with all its ramification. I think we should really start there.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, just picking up from that point, the whole element of education and presenting the information about different careers in aging from a very early age in the game is very important. In fact, I was with a group of college students maybe about 2 weeks ago, and it was very interesting based on the presenters that were also presenting. Somebody was presenting in the field of sports, as well as another person in solar technology. And so, those may sound like abstract professions as far as aging is concerned. But when you think about it, older persons, just like any other member of or any other segment of our population, they do require these kinds of services. And what we're seeing is that we're finding that as we have an aging population in our country, we also find that we have persons in terms of the level of independence. We have over 70-80% of our older adults who are independent, meaning they're up and about and they're busy doing different things. It therefore means that for them, for example, just like the National Council is doing by engaging them in sporting activities are important. And so professionals who are trained, for example, in the area of sports who know how to engage these seniors so that they can continue to participate in sports without harming themselves is something that is important. And so I want, just as Nicoy and the others have charged that education is important, it's very important for anybody, any male out there, to understand that irrespective of what your profession is, even if it's in technology, a lot of younger men are very much interested in, for example, social media. You need to understand that there are different ways and means that you can use your career interest to leverage it, and to be able to support older adults in their respective needs. And then the other point that was raised by Mr. James about engaging our men at the community level by meeting them where they're at is something that is very important, because yes, clearly we see all of these club meetings that the different groups and organizations would put on, but you really can count on your one hand the number of men who are present in these sessions. And the point is that the information that is provided is not just for women, but it's also for men, because as Mr. James did mention earlier, we do have, within our aging population, we have more women growing older. And so it means that if our men knew some of the information, the health information that the women were getting, some of them would be able to live as long as their female counterparts. So that's definitely something that those are areas that we can work on. So policy was mentioned earlier, and I know that the national policy for senior citizens has recently been revised and was presented to the country in September last year, in 2022. I want to really pick on Nicoy and Marlon at this stage, just to ask if you see a particular role for men, given what was presented in the policy and given what we know about the demographics of aging. Is there a special need for more males to become involved in this area of aged care?
Yes, I would say, especially in the thematic area, of health and wellness. As men, we don't generally take into care of our health or take our health very seriously. And I think with the policy going forward, we want to be players in terms of advocating younger men, getting older men, taking their especially outside of their sexual and reproductive health, their whole well-being and everything into perspective. By virtue of doing this job as well, the process of aging is real, and also too, it also brings to bear that we too ourselves have to take our health and well-being in serious business as well.
All right, thanks for that, Marlon. Nicoy?
So, for those who are joining in, by social media or YouTube, so the areas under the new policy, national policy for senior citizens, you have social engagement and participation. Are you hearing me?
Sure.
Yes,
yeah. Social protection, income security and employment. Marlon elaborated on health and wellness just now. We have physical environments, protection and safety, family integration and intergenerational transfers, and governance and capacity building. Now, reality is in all areas would need more males. However, particularly, I see where there is need for more males, especially in the area of governance and capacity building, to help in the development of policies and to address the concerns of males who we seek to serve. So that's an area where I believe we need more males. Under social engagement and participation, Dr. Davis, you said earlier that we have many different professions, and we can encourage persons, to see how well they can, like even the vloggers, they can develop programs that interest older men. So those are two areas where I believe we can take in more males.
All right, great. Thanks for those.
Mr. Hamil also said with, you have more practical nurses who are male. So, bring them into work with older people. Those are areas, and that would fall under health and wellness.
All right. So just before we go on, I just want to give a special shout out to our audience on YouTube. I know they're making a bit of comments on that side. So just want to hail them up. I know that greetings are coming over to the men on our panel, but overall, I think the general feeling is that persons are elated to be a part of this discussion and have the men sharing with us at this time. And so for our listening audience, if there's a question that you would like us to raise to these gentlemen, I'm just inviting you at this time. You can start sending in your questions so that we can share those. And so in the meantime, while I'm awaiting those questions, I want to ask the gentlemen, in terms of your work in aging thus far, what would you consider to be one of your biggest achievements? If you can think of just one, what is the biggest thing thus far for you, having worked or during your current role working in the field of aging? I'm picking up Mr. James.
I was waiting on the others to come in. I think I mentioned it before. I enjoyed getting older people to engage with policymakers. And one of the things that I had worked on, and you're aware of it, Julian, is that we had spent years on it, trying to get the government of Jamaica to introduce a social pension.
Yes.
There's a gentleman by the name of Mr. Hemley. He passed on a few years ago. He even went as far as the United Nations, and he was a strong advocate. And it's a pity that he was not alive to see it happen, where the government of Jamaica was able to introduce a social pension for a person 75 years and older. And yes, the amount is small, but it is a small step and it's a good step. And that is one of the things that I feel very happy about, because we live in a society, as I said, where people are living longer. We have populations, not only in Jamaica, but in the wider region, where people are largely engaged in the informal sector. So they are not entitled to a government pension, a national insurance pension, or any private pension. So you have large numbers of people without a pension. And so it is very important that, and that's one of the things that I advocated strongly for, the introduction of social pensions across the region.
All right.
That's the most gratifying experience that I have had. The other thing is, what other area I've worked on is for involvement of older people's needs in disaster management. And that is something that I've gotten organizations like the Red Cross and the National Disaster Organization, in this case, ODPEM in Jamaica, to include older people in their programming, because what I found is that there was a kind of one-size-fits-all approach, where you simply have a program of preparedness and response without taking the needs of vulnerable populations like children, older people, persons with disabilities, and so on. And that's a lot of work still needs to be done in that area, but that's another area that I feel very good about, that organizations like the Red Cross and some national disaster organizations have begun to include the needs and concerns of older people in their disaster planning.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mr. James. So, Marlon, what is that?
Okay, well, as it relates to just able to assist persons with the execution of grants. So grant funding through the rehabilitation grant persons who are doing small income generating activities that they can need to sustain themselves, and the compassionate grant into the persons who needing building material to retrofit their homes, roofing. Those things are some of the things that so far have been of great thing there. I can earmark or put an uptick for things that I would have done that I'm greatly appreciate so far and seen it as quite rewarding.
Okay, great. Thanks. Nicoy?
I believe my high point in working with older persons and the most rewarding so far is having implemented that project where you reach thousands of older persons, and it's especially in trying to prevent or treating a condition that affects many persons. So and the numbers were reflected, and also older persons going to healthcare facilities and say, okay, I'm seeing better healthcare at this facility, and that's in St. Elizabeth as a result of our policy ask that we would have had with the Southern Regional Health Authority, bringing older persons with the stakeholders at the Southern Regional Health Authority, and them voicing their concerns when they go to public healthcare facilities, and many of their concerns were addressed, and they were satisfied with the improved conditions that they receive when they visit healthcare facilities.
All right, great. Thanks, Nicoy. And then Mr. Hamill.
Right. One of the very satisfying thing for us is to see at the outset when family members would have taken their relatives in to be admitted into the care facility, and at the outset very tentative. It's a new territory for them. They would have never done this before, and sometimes it's somebody as close as mom or dad, and they have to take them from their home that they would have been in for years and take them into an unfamiliar setting. It's somewhat traumatic for sometimes both parties, yeah. But having left them and then they come back in another month or two, and they are happy to see how well they're doing, and they will echo to you, the long gratitude that they would bestow on you. It is satisfying. Another point would be just to know that to a large extent, the lives that these residents live is very much dependent on the kind of programs you put in place for them day to day to make life worth living. Some of them will come into the facility at a very old age, not able to do much. Some younger, but by and large, the quality of life that they will experience is going to have some bearing on what programs you put in place. So when you put programs in place, the birthday parties where you get everybody involved, the special eating days, whatever we choose, and you see them enjoying themselves and see them happy, that makes me happy. And just the thought that, and I mentioned this earlier, that sometimes our lack of knowledge as to taking care of ourselves at this stage when we are up and about, our failure to do so can ultimately lead to our own demise. And the honest truth is, some of these persons who end up in the care facility, if they had better lifestyles, they would not have been there. And to wrap up here, even though you're in that care facility, sometimes there's no better place than your own space. So my point on that is, if you can prolong your independence, your physical well-being, your mental well-being for as long as possible into the life course, then you know that's the best way actually to go. But by and large, I'm just happy. I feel great gratitude when I see these persons enjoying themselves in the confines of the nursing care facility.
All right, great. Thank you so very much for those comments, gentlemen. I want to again recognize our viewers on YouTube, and I know that we have different persons represented, including the chair of the National Council for Senior Citizens, Mrs. Grace Ann Scarlett Duncan. I know she's online and cheering you gentlemen on, so thank you for being there. I think other members of the council are there, as well as Mrs. Ingrid Hardy, a former member, a program officer at the council, as well as students from Mona Aging and Wellness. So among our students, we have Mr. Godfrey Jones, and he says, I'm really appreciative of the production of this presentation. It is, in my view, particularly timely. And this is one of the reasons why I chose you to do the MPH, Master of Public Health in Gerontology. Well presented. Thanks very much, Godfrey, for your comments. And again, really, we're doing this to highlight careers in aging. And so we have 4 gentlemen working in, well, 2 of them working in the same areas, but in different parishes with different experiences. Mr. Hamill is working in the caregiving sector for older adults as a nursing home proprietor, and Mr. Jeff James having worked as regional director for HelpAge International in the Caribbean and now as development consultant. And so these gentlemen are working and have been working in the areas, and they have been doing a fantastic job. Gentlemen, before we go, are there any closing thoughts, anything you would want to share with a gentleman out there who is thinking about a career in aging? Any final thoughts that you want to share?
Well, we cannot separate ourselves from aging. It's a real phenomenon. So it goes without saying, you know, it's best to make the necessary preparations before it's too late, as Mr. Lamina said earlier. So I encourage them to come on board, whether it's to basically learn the discipline or to take on the services that we have available here in National Council and through other stakeholders.
What I would like to say is that regardless of the field that you're working with, if you're working with people, one of the things that perhaps you need to do is to integrate aging issues in your area of work, whether it is in disaster management, whether it is in community development, whatever it is. It's important that you mainstream aging issues in what you do. And that's one of the ways it's going to help. We have to stop compartmentalizing and seeing children as one group, youth as one group, women, older people. We should be able to integrate all population groups into the kind of work that we do. And that's one of the things I think we need to focus on.
All right, thanks for that, Mr. James.
Right. And I would just want to just zero in on our males, primarily because, as I would have mentioned earlier, they seem to be the gender that's coming into the care facility for the most part. And a lot of times when you dig into the lifestyle issues, you will realize that yes, there would have been the hypertension, but nothing was done. Yes, there would have been signs of possible prostate issue, but nothing was done, etc., etc. And then it gets to the point where the disease, if you like, has rendered them unable to function. It compromises the quality of life. They no longer are independent, so they become dependent. And family members, a lot of times, have their lives to live. Yes, they do love them, But at that juncture, the best option is probably to get the individual into a care facility. Could that have been avoided? In my view, and from my experience, a lot of it can be avoided. So especially to our males, I'm saying take care of your health, focus on healthy aging, yes, which is both your physical, the physical aspect, the mental aspect, and just try and do the things that will keep you going in good health for as long as you possibly can.
Okay. For me, and speaking about careers in aging, my advice to a younger male who has the intention to enter the field of aged care is while it is very rewarding. So while you're helping others, you're helping to create that Jamaica that you want to see when you retire, and that you know that's really excellent. That we can have an input in creating your own future.
All right, so gentlemen, I really want to say thank you to the four of you for being here this afternoon and to participate in what I think I don't think this is the end. I think this is just the beginning of a discourse on men in aging. I look forward to other opportunities to engage you. I definitely want to be taking up on some of the suggestions that have been raised about targeting the schools with career in aging sessions, as well as Marlon mentioned about lowering the male matriculation. So we're gonna have to have some more discussions about that. And definitely we want to engage our wider audience to be able to be a part of that discussion and also to make other suggestions. Mr. James talked about meeting the men where they're at. So we also need to have a wider discussion about all of these places where the men are at. And, just recognizing, as Mr. Hamill mentioned, that some of the reasons why we see our men coming into aged care, for example, is that some of it really could have been avoided. So we really want to be able to work through the different areas as best as we can. And so with that said, thanks again to our panelists for being here this afternoon and for having participated in today's session. I also want to say special thanks to the Mona Aging and Wellness Center Planning Committee that came up with the planning of this activity, as well as other activities to celebrate and to recognize Career in Aging Week, and particularly led by Dr. Duladel Willie Tyndale. Thanks to you and your team. We also want to recognize our IT team of Mr. Dwayne Fagan, as well as Mr. Xavier Patterson. We really want to thank them for providing technical support services today. And definitely this is where we have our male on board, because we definitely need that support. So this is what I was talking about, men using whatever skill set to reach the audience of older adults. And to you, our audience, our delightful audience, for having, spend the time with us in our discussion, making comments and sharing this afternoon. We definitely want to say thank you to you for being here. And just as one of our commenters online says, this is Grace Dial. One is never too old to learn, so educating the elderly is definitely essential. All right, so having said that, I want to encourage all of us, especially those persons online, that you want to subscribe. You need to like our channel, subscribe, and of course, we want you to share it. Just before we go, I want to just share with you what's coming up next. Our next signature event takes place tomorrow. Just give us a second as we share that with you just now. So tomorrow, join us at about 10 o'clock. I'm waiting to see that coming up. We're going to be having a riveting session tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. And that session is going to be with Shelley Ann Thompson. And she's going to be talking to us about engaging older adults through the arts. And so we are looking forward to that great presentation from Miss Thompson. And I just want to say she's coming from a background that has nothing to do with aging, and it's very interesting to see how she has pivoted that and just put that really into the limelight of older adults and providing services for them. And for those of you who would be aware, there was a cybersecurity session for that last week, talking about older adults and cybersecurity. And so this is a young lady who is using her skill area to reach out to older adults without coming from an aging background. So as was mentioned by our panelists, Mr. James is being able to integrate whatever background you have, whatever professional background, and to mainstream the issues of older adults into that as well. I see a comment just coming up in the chat that it was a great cybersecurity session, was very interactive and educational. So I know that just like today, we're going to be having a great session tomorrow. So I look forward to seeing all of you. Yes, it's here on your screen now. It's called Engagement Through the Arts, and we will start at 10 a.m. So for tomorrow's session, just like how you joined us today, it's going to be on our YouTube channel. So this is where you press the like button from now, and you subscribe definitely, and you share with your friends. That way they can be joining with you as well. And once you have subscribed, once we go live tomorrow, then it should pop up on your devices so that you're able to join us. So once again, on behalf of all of us here at Mona Aging and Wellness Center, we want to say a big thank you for being here and for participating in today's session. Good afternoon and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a very good session.
Okay, great.